Alright, so I kind of thought we had a lot of options. There was a few people thought that I should do World's Greatest Dad,
Yep.
which I would love to do. I could never think of anything to do with it. The best I could think of was Heather's,
Mm-hmm.
kind of with the whole high school and suicide and putting the dead on a pedestal kind of theme that both of those movies have.
And this may still happen down the line, but this
If I
is
get
way
desperate.
too close to a comfort right now.
But I thought that it would be a cathartic way, I suppose, because you'll notice there's one movie that Robin Williams did. There were plenty, but there's one particular movie that Robin Williams did that was not popular by any means, at least that I know of. Nobody really cared about it, nobody really talked about it. But after the tragedy struck, did this movie get referenced a lot? So, I'm of course referring to What Dreams May Come. I have no idea who has seen this movie and who hasn't. I know at least a few people that have. I don't know many people personally that have, so I don't know exactly how popular or not popular it is. I know there's people that love it. I know there's people that hate it. This movie's got all kinds of things going on. It's been subjected to a couple of Family Guy jokes.
Isn't this partially the reason why we extended it for a second month?
The fact that a copy of Peter Pan fell into my lap, because kind of what started that. So.
Mm.
But they have this.
But this is one that was actually requested.
And there are a lot of afterlife movies. Maybe some that match up more with What Dreams May Come. I don't know. But once again, the one that stuck out to me immediately was Heaven Can Wait, Warren Beatty's version, which we're going to start with actually. For starters, in regards to this story, there's probably some different ways that you know it, and there's some many ways that you know the title. There's a whole bunch of things going on here. Heaven Can Wait is the remake of a movie from 1941 called Here Comes Mr. Jordan. That did really big Oscar nominations wise. And then there was a movie in 1943 by Ernst Lubitsch, also called Heaven Can Wait, that's not the same thing at all. And then with Don Amici, that is a really great movie, by the way. It's kind of like it almost comes off like an early Cirque as opposed to a Lubitsch movie, but it's kind of like a nice combination of both. And then, of course, with this being the remake of Here Comes Mr. Jordan, this itself was remade as Down to Earth with Chris Rock. So this story's gone through a whole lot of different phases. Very interesting phases. I believe in Here Comes Mr. Jordan, he was a boxer. And obviously in Down to Earth, he's a comedian. In this one, he is a football player. So just people doing all kinds of different things with this story. It's interesting to watch it go through all these. It's actually to the point that Buck Henry, Warren Beatty, and Elaine May, who worked on this, are actually credited writers on Down to Earth, along with Louis C.K. and Chris Rock. So that's a whole bunch of interesting history this movie's caused, and has been caused by, and the cause of. So, but actually looking at the story, yeah, as I said, we start off, and Warren Beatty's character plays for the Rams, and he's this fantastic football player who is unfortunately killed when he rides his bike into a tunnel, and there is a collision that we don't see, obviously, because God knows how gruesome it is. We will get to people dying in collisions in tunnels in just a second. But first, Heaven Can Wait takes a very comedic approach to this, obviously. And the one thing that I really like about this movie is I'm just a sucker for those afterlife movies. Like, I don't know, maybe it's like a deep thing where there's, especially when you're like really fear death or an unknown, what happens. Most people believe it's nothing. Some people believe there's a heaven. You kind of have to switch those now. The most and the some. Most people like me just have no idea, and we nervously await. So there's probably a certain comfort in movies like this. With there's this one. There's Defending Your Life. There is Carousel does it. The Green Pastures. Cabin in the Sky to an extent that's kind of like a companion piece to The Green Pastures. I don't know. I have no idea if I'm dropping familiar titles here or not. But these are movies that tackle the afterlife in one way or another. And I've always just kind of been a sucker for those movies, maybe because I find comfort in them or something. I don't know, because of the way they portray what the afterlife could be, just in a very theatrical way, where you're literally in the clouds and you get on a plane and you or in Defending Your Life's case, a shuttle, just all these different things, and it's interesting to watch how different movies take care of it. There was Here Comes Mr. Jordan handles it in a really great way, and this one does it in pretty much the same way. But the issue is that Joe was not supposed to actually die, so he's getting a second chance, but he's being put in the body of an old billionaire who has just been murdered by his wife and her lover, who are Diane Cannon and Charles Grodin. And then, once he takes on that form, it goes from there. We never actually see him, ever, in the old form. He is always Warren Beatty when we see him, which is an interesting approach to take. Our side characters, the most... Okay. I guess we'll go ahead and start with Julie Christie, because she's the other crucial character, I guess. Obviously, they need a love story to happen. And a lot of people think this is one of the more appealing aspects of the movie. To me, though, I kind of feel I have nothing against Julie Christie by any means. Her Oscar-winning movie, Darling, is a little overrated, I'm sorry, but regardless, there's so much happening in this movie. We have him wanting to get his older billionaire body in shape in order to go back to being a football player despite being in that body. There is office politics. There's the murder plot with Charles Grodin. There's him trying to reconnect with Jack Warden's character. There is a lot going on in this movie before Julie Christie's character is introduced. So it kind of feels like it's kind of crowding things a little bit, I think. But, and it's one of those cases where whenever she leaves the movie and then she comes back, you just kind of think, oh yeah, she's in this movie and she's kind of crucial. I totally forgot about that. But looking from the outside in, it's fine. It's a nice aspect of the story to have in there, and it ends up being the story's main closure. So there is that. And she seems a little miscast, but she's not bad in it or anything. I don't know. If they were gonna do that story, maybe they could have, I don't know, maybe hinted at it earlier or something. I don't know. Or I wouldn't say take the character out completely, even though that's kind of my go-to what I want to say, because it would kind of it does need that heart and it needs that romantic edge to it to kind of come fully together. Then we have Jack Warden's character, who is his best friend, basically, and he gets a lot of great scenes in this movie. It's a very inspired Oscar nomination too. I sometimes forget that he was nominated for this. But there's the really good scene where he's talking to Warren Beatty as we see it, but we need to remember that he does not see this in any way and has to be convinced that this is Joe inside this body. And as the scene kind of progresses and he slowly actually starts to believe it, it's one of those things where it seems really, really outlandish that anybody would ever believe this, but the way he performs the scene just kind of makes it, you actually believe that his character believes that this actual scenario is happening. I also like the scene when he's trying to talk to a Mr. Jordan that isn't there, and just little comedy things thrown in there that it totally sets up for. And he really gets to kind of, do the big scenes towards the end when we're getting close to, the football game and stuff like that. And then that really, really heartbreaking last scene in the locker room when Joe doesn't remember who he is anymore. And there's kind of he knows who he is, but Joe no longer knows who he is, and it's kind of the reverse of what it was when they started. And it's this really heartbreaking scene as Warden's character really tries to convince him that they know each other, but Joe's memory has just been wiped of it completely, and he's just become the last guy. And he really, really sells that scene. It's also a really, really handsome production. Like, the production design actually won the Oscar, and the cinematography is great. Everything about it is really good looking in a way, but there are... Okay. Going into it, I think the main appeal of this movie really is what I was talking about before, of how it manages to be such a combination of so many different things. About how we have... It's first and foremost a comedy, and then we have, there's some really heavy dramatic scenes, and there's, stuff like, involving death and accepting death and stuff like that. Even if it's taken, with comedic value, it's still clearly present what the subject is. And then, like I said, there's a bumbling murder plot, and then there's the politics going on in his office and his workplace, and then how all of this, of all things, is building up to be a sports movie at the end of it. A big, triumphant, victorious football movie is what it ends up as after all of this. And then, well, technically it ends up as the love story, but our climax is the big football game, which is... It's very interesting how they combine all this, but somehow manage to still make it, something that's cohesive, weirdly enough. And, of course, this did really well, Oscar nominations. As I said, it won for production design, and I believe it was nominated for cinematography, and, of course, it got a lot of big ones with, it was nominated for picture. Warren Beatty and Buck Henry were nominated for director. Beatty got an actor nomination, Warden in supporting actor, and Cannon in supporting actress. It got a shitload of nominations. And it seems that it was one of those, I imagine in 1978 it was one of those movies where you kind of, because there were some heavyweights in that year. It was up against The Deer Hunter, Coming Home, and Midnight Express. That's heavy competition for a movie like this. So I think Mazursky's movie, An Unmarried Woman, was the fifth one, but it was kind of it was mainly propelled there by Joel Clayburgh's performance, but we're getting into a whole other territory now. The point is that Heavy Come Weight reaches its status, I think, because it does so many different things and does them all right in one way or another. And that's due to the writing and how it's handled, and especially the performances. So even if one or two of them are a little shaky, that's pretty much what it is. I can't help but think Cannon's nomination might be a bit of a coattail nomination, but she still gets to do stuff. She gets to play the crazy ass wife / murderess. So there's just something there at least. At least it wasn't Christie, I guess. So I really don't hate you, Julie Christie. I don't. Okay. And now we will discuss What Dreams May Come, which is, as I said, a very divisive movie. And I guess it really depends on who you are, as far as how you take this movie. There's some people who just think it's this gigantic pile of schmaltzy bullshit. And there's some people that see it as something like really daring and showing us something we've never seen before. It all depends on who you're talking to, but the main story is basically about the most tragic family who ever lived. It starts off, and Robin Williams meets his future wife in this, landscape like it's right out of a photograph or something. It's worth noting, the movie looks really good. That's one compliment even the people who hate it seem to give it. Because it's true. They meet and their boats collide and they fall in love, and they're in this just picturesque location, and they have 2 children, and they're leading the greatest lives ever. He's a doctor, she's an artist. The kids are going to go on and be really successful. Everything's great. And then the kids are killed in a car crash. Dead. And then just as they are getting over that and getting ready to celebrate an anniversary, Williams' character pulls off after he's seen a car wreck in a tunnel and he goes to help because he's a doctor, and another crash happens, killing him. And then the movie eventually gets to a point where the part that really, it's about the afterlife in general, but when it really kind of takes on a story and kind of throws itself into something, is when the wife is thinking about her dead children and her dead husband and how everybody dies. She didn't get to say goodbye to them. Everything sucks. She commits suicide and is potentially sent to hell. And Williams has to, already in the afterlife, go into hell to get her. It's a crazy-ass concept, for sure. I totally get the idea of people saying it's something really daring and like something we've never seen before, particularly in 1998. But the one thing is, this is also, believe it or not, despite its reputation, is an Oscar-winning movie. The visual effects, wow. And there are, most of the time, you can tell with, you can see why. There's some really, really great stuff when he first gets there and he first meets Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character, who's basically his guide. He's like the vision of a dude that was his patient once and died, but when you pretty much in the afterlife look however you want to look at whichever stage in your life. So this guy that died at 63 is now Cuba Gooding Jr. And since, you know, he loved his wife's art, it was one of his favorite things in the world, his afterlife is basically being inside a painting, literally. Like, the landscapes are made of paint that kind of, you know, blend together when he runs through them, and it's just this really... It's something you kind of just have to see. It's a really hard thing to explain, as you can probably guess if you haven't seen it. And Williams' performance, as I said, it pretty much goes with whether you love the movie or whether you hate the movie. If you love the movie, you probably love Williams in it. If you hate the movie, you probably think his performance needs a little work. I think it's fine. He still kind of gets to do his thing when we see him in the doctor's office at the beginning doing his job. He's with a child, so it's Robin Williams doing the voices that he's known for. But obviously, it's mostly a dramatic role, by all means, of course. I think it's... I can give or take it. It's definitely not a performance of his that stands out, but it's not one that I look at negatively in any way. He probably handles it the best he could in the movie as it is. So, we have that going on, and then there's the whole... Yeah, this movie became a really, really touchy subject because of the whole... it's very adamant in the idea that if you commit suicide, you end up in hell and purgatory and all that. And this is definitely a movie people will jump to when the news broke and wanted to discuss in depth. So he, as I said, he actually goes... He basically attempts to go into hell with Max von Sydow as his tracker who takes him there through this. There's also a very interesting Werner Herzog cameo in this movie, where he has a face in the ground that Williams almost steps on that he mistakes for his dad. That's in here, so just take that for what you will. And my problem with this movie, though, is it definitely set up to be something really great. I really do like this concept a lot. The issue here is that after a while, it really starts to wear thin, and the directions that it goes, for starters, a lot of the movie is kind of confusing to me. There's a lot of really weirdly placed flashbacks within it, particularly to his children and their past and stuff like that. Then there's the whole thing where it's like, Cuba Gooding Jr. is like channeling his son, and he's like communicating with him that way. I still don't know what that is. There are just a lot of times in this movie where I'm really not quite sure what is going on. But then there's... The main thing here is you really have a big setup for what could potentially be a real emotional powerhouse of a movie. It really sets itself up for that. But when we get to the end and there's a climax and we reach a conclusion and there's a payoff, it's just kind of... It just kind of lacks, just in general. It just It just lacks everything it should probably have. It actually was, like I said, it's a really broad concept, and it could go in so many different directions. And something like this should have a real, huge, unforgettable payoff at the end. On the contrary, it had been a long time since I saw this movie prior to the last time I watched it, which was relatively recently. Before I watched it recently, I had forgotten what the ending even was. I don't. But it's just so obvious. It's just kind of, oh yeah, of course that's how it ends. The end. So, it's certainly an interesting movie to discuss in the wake of everything that's happened, but, there's just really, there's a lot of things it could have done, or could have, it definitely could have really touched on things wider, or done just something else, or stayed in vein with that first half. But once they get into the dark portion and they're in purgatory, and his wife is there, but she's not there, or her specifically, and I don't know what this movie's doing after a while. So yeah, it's mostly wasted potential, but there are certainly things to love about it. Like I said, like its Oscar-winning appearance, for instance. Well, it's visual effects. Its Oscar-winning appearance would be more like cinematography, which it went nowhere near. But it's an interesting movie to have in his filmography. So I don't know. Clearly, I prefer Heaven Can Wait in this scenario, but I understand why people take To What Dreams May Come in a way that some people do, but I'm kind of I'm not really on the side where I hate it either. There's a lot here that you can really like, and then there's a lot where it's just like, I just have no idea what you're doing anymore. Sorry. So, that's pretty much what I have to say about these.
So, in the last 2 months, we have paid our homage to the career of Robin Williams. Whether he won or lost the versus battle didn't matter, just the fact that we're here to talk about his career and his filmography. Now, there was a lot of things we weren't able to put into here. Obviously, one of the big ones for me would have been Aladdin, because that's the big Robin Williams performance for me. I mean, I did get Death to Smoochie, though, so I was happy with that.
We threw out some Aladdin suggestions, but they just didn't... Mm-hmm. It's just, yeah, I have no idea what could actually do it and seem fitting, because nothing really does, so...
And I recall watching Comic Relief every year with Robin Williams and Billy Crystal and Whoopi Goldberg. And I remember waiting every single year to go to HBO just so I could watch that 7-8 hour telethon with some of the greatest comedians in the history of man. And Robin just doing his thing. And that Broadway special, that's legendary. I mean, it's a newer special, but it's older now, but it's something that everybody watched.
That and a lot in comparison to that, a lot of people didn't seem to care for Weapons of Self-Destruction as much.
Yeah.
But I still get a kick out of that one too. But it's not like the behemoth that one is. That's the one that everybody knows.
It's like It's like with George Carlin. It's like Complaints and Grievances versus It's Bad for You. They think it wasn't really a fitting way because George was getting a lot more like angry in his comedy and everything, and I mean it wasn't as like in the past, but you can love it for everything.
There's also that first I don't know as far as like one that was like televised. I don't know if it was the first one or not, but that special from way the name of it is just out of my head, but it's the one where he's got like there's like a bookend story where there's him and he's like there's like two of them and he's talking to himself and he's like his older or something. I don't remember exactly what it was. I just remember it was really profound. But so yeah.
I mean, I was always a big Mork and Mindy fan. Honestly, I love the show. I love watching it. It was fun, and we thought that this would be a fitting way to pay tribute and pay homage to the career of somebody that has influenced us all. Really,
I really wish it. Especially for the sake of this, is why I another reason that I really wish that What Dreams May Come was a better movie. Yeah. But I think this is kind of given how the movie does end, where he finds paradise in the afterlife,
correct,
and all that.
So we've had a lot of really hard passings in the last 5 to 10 years, and a lot in comedy, and this was a really major one and hit us all hard. So
and a lot of different mediums, too.
no lie. And I got a good feeling that everyone has been influenced by Robin Williams in one form or another that's ever stepped on a comic stage, or has ever stepped in front of a camera, or has ever picked up a pen or sat at a typewriter to write out a script. They've all had a little bit of Robin Williams influence in their life, because he's that type of performer and always was. So that being said, we definitely want to dedicate the entire Versus series of August and September to the memory of the late, great Robin Williams. Nanu Nanu, may you rest in peace.
I didn't watch the show, but I get that reference. Alright.
And all the cursing, Robin would have liked it that way, obviously. So until tomorrow, boys and girls, that's all we got to say about that.